There are two types of light, hard light and soft light, and you have to know the difference between the two. And so there are three essential questions you must ask regarding each of these types of light to understand how they work. What are these three questions? One, what does hard light look like? How do you know if it's hard light or soft light? What does it look like? What's its characteristics? How do you create it? You want to create hard light, but do you really know how to create it? When do you create it? Is there a right time when hard light looks better than soft light? What are the situations where you shouldn't use hard light? We're going to analyze these three questions, and once you know the answers, you're going to understand how hard light works and how you're going to fit it into your repertoire. The first question, what does hard light look like? When you're looking at a photo, do you see sharp shadows on the ground? That is the first clue to know whether or not you are in a hard light situation. Let's take a look at this picture of this subject sitting on the bench here. If you look at the shadow on the bench, you can see that there's a sharp line there. If you look at the shadow that her shoes, take a look at the bottom of her shoes there, at her heel, you're going to see a very sharp shadow from that heel. You know that you're in a hard light situation and the sun is very, very bright. And so the first clue is that you see sharp shadows. Look at this other photo. I'm here in Mexico, and they've got these beautiful flowers on the wall, and it's purple. I go, we got to take a picture here. Now, what type of lighting situation am I in? Look at the shadows. You could see that they're sharp, distinct shadows on the wall, and you are in a hard light situation. You can also see the shadows maybe that she creates, and actually there's an archway there, and at the bottom you can see that there's sharp shadows there, and so you can immediately see that you're in a hard light situation. This next photo, look at the lighting on the subject. You're going to see a hard contrast line between the highlight and the shadow side. And when you see that hard line, you know you're in a hard light situation. And so you can look at her cheek, right? And you can see that there's a very distinct line on her cheek separating the highlight and separating the shadow. And so you get clues that that is a hard light situation. Also, her arm is causing a shadow across her body, and you can also see that that is a sharp distinction between shadow and highlight. And whenever you see that sharp contrast like that, you know you're in a hard light situation. Now, how do you create it? Well, one, hard light is created by a very small light source. So, for example, you are outside and the sun is pretty bright and it's pretty high in the sky. You look up and you measure that sun and you're going to go, well, it's going to be about that big. Well, whenever you look at any kind of light source and you go, it's about that big. It's like less than an inch. And you literally measure the light source. You see where the light is coming from and you measure it. And if it looks something like that, you know it's going to create very hard light. And you are in a hard light situation. So one is that the light source is small. And in order for you to create hard light, you can also change the distance. And so it seems just kind of intuitive. The farther away the light source, the smaller it becomes, right? And so the harder the light. You can make light harder by moving it further away from your subject, or you can make it softer by bringing it closer to your subject. And so that's how you create it. When do you create hard light? Well, one, for me, when I see vibrant colors and I really want that to be accented, that's the perfect time to use hard light, because hard light creates crisp, clean colors. Two, you use hard light when you're in the hard light situation. So for example, you're going out, it's a bright sunny day, and you see sharp shadows all around you. Well, you can put hard light on your subject because they're in a hard light situation and hard light is all around them. So you're putting hard light with hard light. That light that you're using becomes believable. If you try to put hard light in a soft light situation, which we'll talk about a little bit later, it might not look that great because the eye says, wait a second, the light on the subject doesn't really match the light in the background, and I don't quite believe it. So that's why it's important to learn the difference between hard light and soft light, because when you see your environment, you've got to learn how to match that. And you got to know the options that you can use for lighting. Okay, so take example of this photo here. We're in Cozumel, Mexico, and we've got the girl in this very bright swimsuit, and you've got the blue sky. Whenever you see beautiful blue, bright blue sky, hard light works perfect for that. It's just like put hard light on your subject, put the blue sky to come out in your camera, and I guarantee you're going to get a great picture every single time. So here it is. I got the blue sky, and then I've got my subject wearing bright colors. I put hard light on my subject. Bam, those colors pop. Here's another hard light on hard light situation. If you look at the shadows that it's creating, you can look on the ground next to the dress, for example. So she's on this dock. And so look on the dock and you can see the shadow that the dress is creating in the very sharp, distinct lines, because the sun is behind her creating that shadow. And so I put hard light on my subject and it looks fine. How do you know my light is hard? Look at the shadow under the bouquet. It's fairly sharp. It's not soft or diffused. You don't see a gradual shadow line. So you can see that I used hard light on my subject, but because my environment was hard light, it looks great. Let's talk about soft light. Let's ask those same three essential questions. What does soft light look like? How do you create it? And when do you create it? Number one, what does soft light look like? Well, look at this photo to the left with the gal wearing the hat. One, soft or no shadows at all. So you're looking in your environment and sometimes you don't hardly see any shadows, or if you do see a shadow, it's barely there. That's kind of like this situation here. With this picture, you're going to see subtle shadows. You see a smooth transition between the highlight and the shadow. For example, look at the subject's cheek where you can see a highlight and shadow. That other photo of that Asian person with the white makeup on, you saw a distinct line between highlight and shadow. Here, you see a very gradual line between the highlight on her cheek, of her cheek here next to her nose, versus the shadow on the side of her face. Is very transitional, is very smooth. That means you're in a soft light situation. This type of light is ideal for portraits. It's just the magic light that works with portraits. So you're going to have to learn how to use soft light in your photos because it makes portraits look amazing. So you can see this next photo where there's very soft light on my subject. and you hardly see any shadows there, and you see smooth transitions between the shadows. So you can tell I use soft light on my subject